Good morning. Thank y'all for joining us on this first huddle of 2023. Happy New Year, everyone. So this morning, I came up with this kind of last minute, so bear with me here. But I want to talk just about writing special stipulations in a contract. Okay. Anybody know like the dynamics of what should go into a special stipulation? Sort of ish. All parties agree is a great way to start it off. Let me say this. If you guys have questions about special stipulations, need help, contact help desk, contact the broker hotline. We will help you write them, convey what you're trying to say. All right, a lot of times though you're doing these late at night and you're just trying to get it done. First thing, it's always wise with special stipulations to number them. All parties agree to the following. Number one, itemize everything. That way, if something gets scratched, it's very clear what's being scratched on it. And then once you do scratch it, obviously all parties need to initial the changes, right? So do that first. That's kind of a number one rule of things. You can even letter them if you like to, your special stipulations so that they're itemized, all right? When writing a special stipulation, who is doing what, by when, and what happens if they don't do it. So who is doing what, by when, and what happens if they don't do it. So anybody got any kind of questions on anything as far as like a special stip I can write in my head real quick? Like all parties agree that the seller shall complete the repairs, itemize the repairs, the following repair, 1, 2, 3, replace the toilet, the leaking toilet, whatever they are, by within 4 days of the close date, and buyer reserves the right to terminate if they don't do it. The ending there is kind of redundant, but it also puts the other side on notice. Does that make sense? So go ahead, Lanier, you were gonna ask something?
Yeah, basically just that, like, inspection turns out they need a new roof, their insurance company will pay for it, but how do you term, like, this needs to be done?
Who's choosing the roofing company?
Probably
The seller, because the seller's insurance company. So all parties agree. So the seller's insurance company is replacing the roof prior to closing, right? So all parties agree that the seller shall have the roof replaced by ABC Roofing within 4 days of the closing date. And then you can expand on it and say, all parties agree that because we don't know when the roofing company and all that, there's a delay with the insurance carrier, they're saying, and they're the roofing company, so it's going to delay. You can add language in there about extending out the closing date automatically for up to 2 weeks. If the roof isn't completed, there's lots of different things you can do there. And if it's not done, the buyer reserves the right to terminate and receive their earnest money back. Make sense? So any other examples like that? Anything that y'all are writing? Because my brain kind of goes into a cloud without specific examples because there's literally a million different examples. So the keys are who is doing what, by when, and what happens if they don't get it done. That's the simple thought process behind it. So go ahead, Lanier.
Would you use special steps for like personal property that's not part of the seller's disclosure?
Personal property? No, that should go on a personal property sheet. Yep. There is a special form for that as well. So personal property, because if you're conveying a pool table and all the pool furniture and all of that, if you include it in the contract, the lender may view that as you're financing all of these purchases into the sale of the property, and they don't like that. Additionally, if you do have this long list of repairs for an amendment that you're wanting done, and you're saying to get cash instead, right? Like we want the seller to contribute $5,000 towards the buyer closing costs. Never, ever, ever in the amendment put in lieu of repairs. You will say seller to contribute $5,000 towards buyer closing costs. And if the seller is pushing for something to say that there's nothing else, you can include the language that ends due diligence. So And due diligence period shall expire with acceptance of this amendment. That way you don't have the right to just terminate for any reason after that. So, big things. Can anybody repeat them to me? Who? Itemize, first of all, yes, but who is doing what, by when, and what happens if they don't do it? AKA call the help desk, thank you. Because we will help you with it. Call the broker hotline. Any one of us can help you write that up, draw it up. One of the big things that I see is people, like, if you're doing a bunch of repairs, you want a bunch of repairs done on the property, get an extension of due diligence. The buyer, if you're not getting cash, if you're not getting a contribution to closing costs and you want the repairs done, the seller and buyer are at odds. If we represent the buyer, we want the buyer to control the repairs. So that means the buyer needs to get a contractor, figure out what it's gonna cost, and have them do the repairs, have their contractor do the repairs. The seller's objective is to get the work done and get the house sold to them. So quality of work, a workmanship, all that language that people put in there, a workmanlike manner, repair shall be completed in a workmanlike manner, that is included in our contract already. You don't need, that's redundant language, you can put it in there. But having a contractor do it and not do it to the buyer's liking is not a reason for the buyer to back out of the deal. And I can give you a prime example of, we had one that the paint was kind of rough on a fireplace, on the outside fireplace. The contractor went out there, they painted it, provided an invoice, did all that stuff, it was paid. A week later, there was a huge rainstorm, and there was literally paint like dripping, like paint runoff, because they used the cheapest paint possible to get it done absolutely as cheaply as possible. The work was done, right? Now these people own a house and they have paint streaks running down the house. Well, it was done, it was painted. It was just painted with a cheap quality paint. So you don't control the quality. So that'd be my second point on repairs, or another point on repairs, just get a contribution to closing costs. It's the same thing to the buyer if they pay for it now, or if the seller, or if they finance it through closing costs, however. All right?
Yeah, and I've gotten quite a few times where just being too vague in a special stipulation, you can get taken advantage of in a situation like that, where yes, the seller is trying to go as cheap as possible.
Yep.
And then if you don't put specifically what kind of paint they want, even they can.
Yes. Sherwin-Williams Promar 400 paint. Because there is a Promar 100, which is the builder grade that goes on fresh drywall. That is basically like their first coat that they just spray on everything. Yeah, that stuff is about $18 a gallon. Yeah, good Sherwin-Williams Emerald paint is about $60 a gallon. If that tells you anything on it. There's a huge difference in paint quality and quality of everything, so.
Something also of those lines, like even if the seller says that they'll give you something, they'll leave the buyer stuff for free, still put on a bill of sale, have it for $0, just because they can still, if it's not, and nowhere in writing, even though, oh, the seller said they'll leave me this.
And then they took it.
Yeah.
Very good. Anything else? No, we good? Who does what, by when, and what happens if they don't do it? Ready?